Hi everyone, and welcome to RPixels. Today's recent artwork is one of my favorites, and it's one of the most exciting things that I will show you today. To give a little context to the artwork, this artwork is inspired by Caspar David Friedrich, a German painter during the 1800s, and he is associated with German Romanticism. German Romanticism is an artistic movement that sought to reconnect humanity with feeling and spirituality. Nature and landscape have become one of the subjects during this period, and it is where our mentioned painter is very good at. However, his artworks are not focused on the nature and the landscape, but it is the feeling that he had in the presence of the landscape, which it is stated as the essence of the sublime. Now that I have understood the context of his works, I began to search for some of his paintings, and I used them as an inspiration. And I also used color palettes, and I tried to use them to at least match the mood of his paintings. I also sketched the landscape artwork that I had in mind earlier in order for me to prepare the necessary stock images for the final artwork. To start off with, I displayed my sketch and started building the foreground. It didn't matter if it doesn't match the sketch as long as it gives me a rough idea for the final output. As I was building up the foreground, I used the hue saturation adjustment layer and grouped it into all of the foreground images since I was aiming for a monochrome approach of the colors. I figured that the ground texture is kinda empty, so I used some of the stock images that have many rocks as an added texture to the ground. It's a challenging part because I still have to blend the separate images into a seamless one. But because of the hue saturation adjustment layer, it kind of tricked my mind into thinking that they are blended and seamless on my end. In this part, I was building up towards the middle part of the artwork, and the good thing about sketches is that you can always change it along the way when working on the final output. I realized that I can make use of a bigger stone structure so that it helps emphasize how big the landscape is when compared to the rest of the elements. As for the background, I managed to find a fitting sunset image as the base background image and another landscape structure as a point of interest in the artwork. Behind the scenes of this recording, there were many tries in getting the atmospheric vibes right, and for the final try, I managed to use cloud brushes and warp them like hell in order to achieve the desired look. And it worked! Contrary to the painter's style, I inserted a big blob of sunlight in the artwork as I like the idea of inserting some sort of a fantasy or exaggeration in some of the elements. It also turned out to be an interesting point of interest for the rest of the artwork. Now that I'm satisfied with the atmospheric background that I made, it was time to insert human elements in the artwork. Like what I said earlier, I wanted to make it feel like the landscape setting is huge, hence I plan to insert human elements and make them smaller so that it would give off that large environment vibes. We added the human elements, and the next part was to add the highlights and shadows to the artwork. At this point, I was enhancing the lights and shadows by adding another layer and setting the blend modes to soft light and another layer with the overlay blend mode. Lastly, adding the cherry on top, I added dust textures and eventually added the flaky grain textures to give it a painterly-like feel. There we go guys, here's the final output in an attempt to create a landscape that is inspired from Caspar David Friedrich. I really like how it turned out, especially in the colors that I used and the atmosphere that I tried to visualize from the sketch that I worked earlier. I plan to create more landscape artworks to apply what I've learned in studying the painter's works, and I'm really excited for more. As for now, if you liked the video, you can also visit my other videos featuring the process of some of my previous artworks. Comment down if you want to suggest anything related to photo manipulation, and see you guys in the next video.